The sound of a child's labored breathing echoed through the marble hallway like a haunting melody that refused to fade. Maria Gonzalez clutched the small, trembling body against her chest, her own tears falling freely onto the fevered brow of 6-year-old Tommy Harrison. The boy's skin burned like fire beneath her calloused hands, hands that had scrubbed these same floors for 3 years, hands that had never failed to show gentleness where his own family had shown only indifference. "Please, Mr. Harrison," Maria whispered, her voice breaking as she looked up at the towering figure in the $1,000 suit. "He needs to go to the hospital. Look at him, he can barely breathe." Richard Harrison III stood in the doorway of his penthouse office, his cold steel gray eyes surveying the scene with the same detachment he might show a quarterly earnings report. At 42, he commanded a business empire worth $12 billion, but the sight of his own son struggling for breath seemed to move him no more than watching stock prices fluctuate on his monitor. "The boy has survived worse," he said flatly, adjusting his platinum cufflinks. "Children are resilient. A little fever never killed anyone." Maria felt her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. She had been Tommy's primary caregiver since his mother died in that car accident 2 years ago, a tragedy that had somehow hardened Richard's heart even further rather than opening it to his son. The lonely child had become her world, and she his. While his father buried himself deeper in mergers and acquisitions, Tommy found love and comfort in the arms of the woman who cleaned his house. "Sir, with all due respect," Maria said, standing straighter despite the weight of the sick child in her arms, "this isn't just a little fever. His temperature is 104 degrees. He's having trouble breathing. Children die from things like this." Richard's jaw tightened. "Don't be dramatic, Maria. You're a housekeeper, not a doctor. Put him to bed and give him some aspirin." The cruelty of those words hung in the air like poison. Maria looked down at Tommy, whose usually bright blue eyes were now glazed with fever and pain. She had watched this precious child take his first steps in this very hallway while his father was in Tokyo closing a deal. She had been the one to comfort him through countless nightmares, the one to read him bedtime stories, the one to kiss his scraped knees and celebrate his small victories. "Daddy." Tommy's voice was barely a whisper, so weak and fragile that it seemed to float through the air like a feather. "I don't feel good." For just a moment, a single, fleeting second, something flickered across Richard's face. But it vanished as quickly as morning mist, replaced by the same stony indifference that had become his trademark. "You'll be fine," he said curtly. "Maria, take him to his room. I have a conference call with Singapore in 10 minutes. As Richard turned to walk away, Maria made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't stand by and watch this child suffer while his father prioritized profit margins over his own son's life. Her mind raced back to her own childhood in El Salvador, where her mother had worked 3 jobs to afford basic medical care, where love meant sacrifice, where family meant everything. "No," she said quietly. Richard stopped mid-stride, his back still to her. "Excuse me. I said no." Maria's voice grew stronger, fueled by a mother's love for a child who wasn't even her own. "I won't take him to his room. I'm taking him to the hospital. If you want to fire me for it, go ahead. But I won't let this baby suffer because you've forgotten how to be a father." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard slowly turned around, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "How dare you speak to me that way? You're the help. You do what I tell you to do. I'm the only person in this house who loves your son," Maria shot back, tears streaming down her cheeks. "And right now, that's more important than your money or your power or your pride." Without another word, she carried Tommy toward the elevator. Her hands shook as she pressed the button, knowing she was about to lose the job that supported not only herself but also her elderly mother back in California. But as she looked down at Tommy's pale face, she knew she would make the same choice 1,000 times over. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt like an eternity. Tommy's breathing had become even more labored, and Maria found herself praying in Spanish under her breath, prayers her grandmother had taught her, prayers that had sustained her through her own struggles as an immigrant trying to build a better life. She had no car, no insurance, and exactly $47 in her purse. But she had something more valuable than anything Richard Harrison owned: she had love. The taxi ride to Children's Hospital cost $32 she couldn't afford. Maria held Tommy close, whispering stories in his ear, telling him about her own son back in California who was just his age, promising him that everything would be okay even as her own world fell apart. Hours later, as dawn broke over the city, Maria sat in the hospital waiting room still wearing her cleaning uniform, still clutching the discharge papers that confirmed what she had known all along: pneumonia. The doctors said if she had waited even a few more hours, Tommy might not have made it. She dozed fitfully in the uncomfortable plastic chair, Tommy finally sleeping peacefully in the bed beside her, his breathing steady for the first time in days. The IV drip had worked its magic, and color was returning to his small face. A shadow fell across her, and Maria opened her eyes to find Richard Harrison standing there. But something was different. Gone was the imperious businessman in the expensive suit. Instead, she saw a man whose clothes were wrinkled, whose hair was disheveled, whose eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion and something that might have been tears. "The doctors told me," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "They said you saved his life." Maria said nothing, just watched as this powerful man seemed to crumble before her eyes. "I've been such a fool," he continued, sinking into the chair beside her. "When Sarah died, I thought if I could just focus on work, if I could build something big enough, successful enough, it would somehow make the pain go away. But I ended up losing the only thing that really mattered, my relationship with my son." He looked at Tommy, sleeping peacefully, then back at Maria. "You showed more love for my child in one night than I've shown him in 2 years. You risked everything for him. Why?" Maria wiped away a fresh tear. "Because love doesn't calculate the cost, Mr. Harrison. It just acts. That little boy in there has needed his father, but he's had to settle for my love instead. And I gave it freely because that's what children deserve, to be loved, to be protected, to matter more than anything else in the world." Richard reached out tentatively and touched Tommy's hand. "I don't know how to be a father anymore. I don't know how to love without it hurting. You start by being here," Maria said simply. "You start by choosing him over everything else. Every single day." As the morning sun streamed through the hospital window, something beautiful began to bloom in that sterile room. A man began to remember what it meant to be a father. A woman's selfless love had broken through walls of grief and pride. And a little boy would wake up to discover that sometimes, when love is brave enough to take a stand, miracles really do happen. 3 months later, Maria still worked for the Harrison family, but now as Tommy's nanny, with a salary that allowed her to bring her own son to live with them. Richard had learned to leave the office by 6, to read bedtime stories, to be present for the small moments that make up a childhood. And Tommy had what every child deserves: a father who loved him and a second mother whose tears had watered the seeds of a family reborn.